Welcome to the Ranchonomics Podcast, where we empower you to build a better ranch and transform your operations into a thriving business. I'm your host, John Haskell. Let's get started. Welcome to the Ranchonomics Podcast. Today we're going to do another stories episode, and I am excited to be joined by the Sims family from McFadden, Wyoming. And if you have never been to McFadden in July, you have probably not fed enough mosquitoes. So welcome to the podcast.
All right. Thanks, John, for having us here. Yeah, Shannon Sims. I'm the fourth generation of Sims Cattle Company.
And I'm Melinda Sims, and we, as of yesterday, have been married 26 years.
Wow. And April and Scott, how about you guys?
So, yes, John, thanks for having us. And I'm Scott Sims, and I'm third generation on this operation, and along with April, and she can introduce herself. But, you know, we're 50 years married this year.
Yeah. Wow. There you go.
So, yeah, I'm April Sims and been here since a month after Sims S&S Ranch was formed, I guess.
Wow. Pretty cool. All right. So you've been there the whole time, minus 1 month.
Yep.
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, let's get started. You guys have a really neat operation down in southern Wyoming where the wind does blow. You're north of I-80 and actually you're both sides of I-80, right? Kind of there, not far from Elk Mountain, but kind of between there and Laramie. You guys have been involved in a whole lot of really interesting stuff over the years. And I'd like to get an idea of what you guys have done, what transitions you've made, what kind of challenges you've faced. So Scott and April, you guys want to start with the history from long ago?
Yes, be glad to do that. You know, you mentioned you got two generations here, and I think, you know, there's three other generations. There has been three other generations out there. So I'd like to go back to my grandparents, Roy and Opal Sims. My granddad worked for the oil company here at McFadden for 13 years before they were able to purchase the ranch. While he's working for the oil company, he had a background, grew up around ranching, but he always wanted to be a rancher. And so he leased a little ground from neighbor up the creek and run a few cows and raise some work horses. And then he would go down the valley and help the widow lady, owner of the diamond ranch below us, a big outfit, and help her out. But, you know, in the back of his mind, he wanted to be a rancher. So one night, Mrs. Bosler called his granddad up, owner of the diamond ranch, and said, you know, Roy, I think I can probably fix you up at the ranch. If you'd come down some night, we'll get together and see what we could do. And so he was all excited about that. Didn't know what quite that meant, you know, fix up with the ranch. But anyhow, as it turned out, she took a fall downstairs and broke her hip that night, ended up in the hospital, and died of pneumonia. And so he was like, well, what do I do now? But so he was able to work with Mrs. Bosler's son, and looked like maybe they could come to a deal on the place that we have now, but needed to go to town and see if they could borrow some money. So they went to Laramie and went to the bank, and of course they really didn't have any collateral, but they got turned down by the bank. And so as they're leaving the bank president stepped out the door with them, and he looked both ways and he said, Roy, I think I can help you out. And so he was able to get a loan from this bank president who was also a rancher. And, you know, we think about that a lot. We tell that story a lot and like, okay, where would we be today? What would things look like? You know, but that was the start of this.
That's cool. Yes. And this was a personal loan from the bank president to make this happen.
Exactly.
Wow.
So anyhow, they came home and went to work. And my dad said one time, he says, how come you didn't buy more land? Because they paid $2 an acre for dry land and $10 for irrigated. And Dad's like, why didn't you buy more land? And Granddad said, I didn't know how we were going to pay for what we got. But they knew how to work. They just went at it, and that's how it started.
That's awesome. $2 an acre. That's pretty good. And I'm sure at the time it was terrifying, just the same way current prices are.
Oh, definitely. In my generation is when we paid off that loan completely.
Oh, yeah. No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Give me the time span there from origination to to pay off?
So they were able to buy the ranch in 1942, and we paid it off, I'm going to say probably about in the, it's hard to say that part of it, but it's probably in the late 80s or 90s, something like that.
Yeah, wild. No kidding.
Yes.
I assume you refinanced. You weren't making payments to the bank president anymore.
Yeah,
Right.
we had.
Right. Yes. So anyhow, if I can continue on from there,
You bet.
they ranched. My dad had an opportunity to come back to the ranch. He started college, but he had an opportunity to come home, and so he came home early. As it turned out, Granddad and Dad could not get along. They could not ranch together. And so Dad had become a water commissioner on Rock Creek as a side job. And his boss then told him, he said, Don, if you go back to college and get a degree, it'll pay you another $1,000 a month, which back then that was in the late 60s. But, that's quite a bit of money. So Dad went back to school and got a degree and became a hydrographer commissioner in the valley. In the meantime, Granddad not getting any younger. He had a cow get him down and dislocated both of his shoulders. And so his health started to go downhill. So he was, he talked about selling the ranch, but Dad was able to make a deal with him to lease the ranch. And so Dad leased the ranch with the guy that had an equipment dealership down here at Rock River for 5 years. And that's why I was finishing up high school and starting college. And after that 5 years, I decided to come home and decided I'd rather calve cows instead of go to school. My dad was disappointed, but he said, Scott, I'm disappointed in you, but never quit learning. And that's a big thing that stuck with me. So, that was about that time, as April said, this is 1976. I always tell about whenever April and I had our first date, Dad and I bought our first tractor together. When we started,
Mr. Big Spender here.
yeah. So anyhow, when we started, we really didn't have anything. I had 30 some cows. Dad had 50 some. I think we used our own pickups. We had a 14-foot horse trailer. We really, a hay rack, and that was about it. And that's how we started.
Just out of curiosity, since we got a timeline to go with this is 1976. You own 30 cows. What were those cows worth about then? Do you know?
I don't know, $300 or $400 a head, I suppose. I don't know for sure. Yep.
And what was the general sentiment in the country? How are things going economically and all that?
At about that time, really wasn't too bad. Calves weren't worth a lot of money.
Yep.
We didn't have a lot of money. We sold pasture. We started fertilizing. We'd sell hay type of deal. We didn't run up a lot of debt. We'd buy cows as we had an opportunity. They were close, but mostly just would keep our increase in heifers and increase our herd that way. That was fine. I will have to say that in the 80s, though, we had a chance to buy a ranch that was just down the valley from us. And we turned it down, decided it wasn't worth the risk, and it was probably a good decision to do that because you know what things were like in the 80s. Interest rate got to 16, 17%. And there were some good people that reached out and tried to buy land and they went broke. And so we lease that same place now. We lease that ranch.
So 30 cows in 1976 and it's 2026. So on the 200th anniversary of America, that's where we're starting. And we're 50 years later exactly. So that's pretty cool.
Yes.
Your cows are worth a little more than $300 or $400, I assume now.
Absolutely. It's
and you have a few more of them.
Yeah. And I remember, us selling calves or steer calves for 48 cents.
Yeah, pretty cool. Okay. All right, so keep going. So you guys get married. You start out with a small herd. You're selling pasture and some hay. How did the operation evolve from there? Is your dad still involved at this point, or is it just you and the machinery dealer?
No. After I became a partner with Dad in 1976. And we were the two of us together until 1983 when my brother Olin came into the operation. So he was a partner with us after that time. John, I'll have to say that probably one of the best things that happened to us, we had to borrow money. We had to borrow money to buy fertilizer, put fertilizer on. So we had to borrow money. So we started out going to Laramie to the bank, and it didn't take us long to find out they really didn't understand agriculture that well. But we switched bankers, and the best thing that happened to us is we had to start doing a budget and balance sheet every year. And I think that's the best thing that happened to this kid here that never completed college. So,
Had you ever been exposed to that before or trained in any of that? Or did you kind of have to figure it out with the bank?
no, I really didn't. I took some economic classes in college, but otherwise, no, that was a real eye opener. We had to sit down and put some figures together. Thank God we didn't have a lot back then, so it didn't take very long.
It makes it a lot easier to fill out if you don't have much.
Right. But anyhow, I think that helped us a lot through the years. And then as partners, we had at the base what we came in with as far as our contribution. And then as partners, we split everything equally from there on. So we would keep track of where we were through the years and what each of our ownership was.
Yeah, excellent.
So we had to know how we were doing, where we were going.
Yep. Yeah, the partnerships, when it's not just your family, an immediate family deal, it makes it a little more complicated because you've got to let other people know where everybody stands. So that's neat. So and you said you were keeping heifers, operation pretty much the same during that period? You're grazing cows, you're cutting hay?
Yes, pretty much the same. We, after Olin came into the operation, instead of selling steer calves, we started feeding everything to finish. We keep a replacement heifers. We'd send them to Torrington to the farm, same place where we fed our cattle out. They'd grow out our replacement heifers. We're AI, bring them back. So we started doing that. You can make pretty good money feeding to finish, but about the same time, we lost Olin in 2007, and I know Shannon came into the partnership in 2007. And man, right after that, we had a couple of years, 08 and 09, if I remember right, maybe in 10. Feeding deal wasn't good.
Right, that you're taking a beating, feed costs were high, and you weren't getting paid to put the gain on.
Right. And we just didn't have good luck as far as buying protection, it seemed like. It ended up just being a cost more than anything. I guess it'd protect us from the big losses, but we took a hard look at it because we had at that time, whenever Shannon came in, we actually had a pretty good debt, but our owner equity was still 55%. I think the lowest it was is 55%, and I might be wrong. But we accumulated, we bought some cows along, we bought machinery. We started out with that one tractor, so we put equipment together. We bought my granddad's equipment. And so we were increasing in net worth all that time too. But about that time though, we were a little vulnerable, and we decided probably the best thing for us to do is, instead of feeding calves to fat, is to just diversify our marketing, do that. So we went to selling our steer calves in the fall. And then Shannon can probably tell you more about where we are as far as our heifer development program, where we got away from taking heifers to
feed,
growing them too big, and that didn't work real good. So I'll let him get into that.
Okay, and I want to come back to that, but I want to know, when did you get into, you got exposed to HRM stuff at some point. When did that start in this journey?
So
I'm assuming it was before then, but maybe I'm not correct.
Olin and I went to HRM school up in Bozeman, Montana in February of 1989.
Okay.
And, Alan Savory and Roland Cruz put on that school because we were a little frustrated with our grazing, what our rangeland looked like. We'd hear about rotation programs. It didn't seem like anyone really knew. The thing that always stuck with me was they'd talk about decreasers. Well, that grass is a decreaser. That grass is a decreaser. Well, it can handle pressure to grazing. And I was like, oh my God, there's got to be something more to this. And so we went to school, and just, our heads were full by the time we got home. And so we went to work and started dividing pastures and developing water, and learned a lot from that. And probably the biggest thing that we probably learned from that is allowing for recovery time. At school, we talk about 30-day recovery, 90-day recovery, 120, whatever. We come home and thought, well, we can go through each of our pastures twice in the season. Well, not here at 7,200 feet in
Yeah.
season
It's
grass.
high, cold, and dry. That's a little tough. Yeah.
And so we can get more into where that has gone to since then.
We used to take in a lot of cows during the winter, too, to feed. Elmer Peterson's deal. You might mention that.
Yes. Yeah. And that was a big deal. We were fertilizing everything. We doubled our hay production on this place. And so we sold a lot of hay. But probably the good thing that happened is the cattle came here. So the manure stayed here. So they'd bring cattle in the fall and then they'd take them back out before calving in the spring. We did that for 25 years with rancher from up at Rollins.
Yeah. Fantastic. And was that intentional when you started that? Were you thinking about keeping the manure on your place, or was that a happy accident?
I think at the time it was a happy accident. It just made more sense. It's cheaper for him to go down here than haul hay up there. But I think later, after we started thinking more about soils, then it was like, yeah, that's a good thing that we did.
Yeah. This is the same Petersons at Walcott, is that?
Yeah. Elmer Peterson. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's excellent. All right. So where do we go next? Do we want to go to heifers?
No, I've got a couple things Dad kind of skipped. I feel like they've got to come into the conversation. So in 1989, him and Olin went to the savory school, and they immediately came home and started building fence, dividing pastures. I mean, it was 6 months later, right, Dad?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Went to a land planning school. Like they didn't half-hearted jump into this. Like it was immediate. And I think at that time, Savory was selling it as you can double your carrying capacity, right? And so they had that in mind, and it didn't take them very long to figure out that we needed a lot more than 30 days recovery, and doubling our carrying capacity was a little pie in the sky.
Probably optimistic, yeah.
Yeah, it was a little optimistic, but they were making some good moves, and people were taking notice, and they were ready to expand. And in 1992, one of the neighboring places came up for lease, and there was several people interested in it. And because of their management and what they had done on their own place, because of their mindset, the owner of that place went to Dad. He said, "I've got some offers, but I want you guys to have it." And if I remember right, Dad, you were kind of like, I don't know that we're ready to take that, but you bit it off. And I think that's an important part of our story, because if it wasn't for that place, I wouldn't be here. The ranch as it was when I came back from the University of Wyoming in 2001 was not big enough to bring a young kid and his new wife back into the operation. The other part of that story that I feel is really important is Dad mentioned it in 2007. We lost Olin. That full story, the way that sequence happened is I came back to the ranch in 2001 with the understanding that if we could work together, I would be able to work into ownership. So that was about June of 2007. I'll never forget it. That was the day. Well, let me back up. We had struck a deal with Wyoming Game and Fish to rehabilitate one of their WHMAs, their wildlife habitat management areas. And part of Melinda's, my job, was to spend June in a camper trailer herding those cows, building temporary fence.
And
And she herded kids, I herded cows. And so anyway, my grandpa in June of that year decided he was ready to retire his equity. He didn't want to quit working, but he was ready to stop taking risks with his money. And so we sat down in that camper up at Wagon Hound Creek. I just remember looking around this camper going, I just became the owner of a business, and Grandpa stepped out.
That's awesome.
It was. That's the kind of stuff that sticks with you. And just the circumstance, you think of become the owner of a business and I don't know. I always
some big
thought,
formal thing.
Yeah, corporate boardrooms and like people in suits and ties. And here we are, probably, some crap on our boots and around a camper table and signed the documents. So yeah, then flash forward to December of that year, and that's when we lost Olin. So Dad and I are two pieces of
Now it's just two of you. Yeah.
Yeah, we'd gone from new ownership and three of us to two, and Dad had just lost his brother, and we had cattle in the feedlot, and things were tough. And I remember sitting down. We had a lot of debt, like Dad said, and I looked, and it doesn't seem that much now, looking back and kind of knowing what I know now, but then also with inflation. But we were paying $17,000 a year in interest. And I'm like, at that time, that was almost a salary for somebody. It's like, holy crap. And so we took the Bert Teichert advice. We started waging war on costs. And then we also started capturing profit when it was there. And that's when we moved to the selling calves. Remember that in 2010, we sold calves on the video, and we got $110 for them, weighing 450 pounds. And we thought we'd hit the jackpot,
Struck gold right there, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, and we'd locked in a profit on those calves, and didn't
Fantastic.
have to go into a lot. So, and then there was a few tough years. That was when we kind of started seeing the light. The other thing that Dad and I talked about, starting after Olin died, after everybody kind of got their feet under him again, was we had a holistic vision, holistic goal that Dad and Olin, and I guess Grandpa had helped with that. I guess Mom had helped with that. I don't know.
Well, it's kind of like Olin and I put together, and we showed April and we showed Dad, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that looks pretty good." So they really didn't
okay.
ownership in it, type deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was good. I don't remember what it said. I remember buying into it. It was a 3-part goal. So it addressed your land, your people, and your money. But we're like, it's a whole new situation. Because like I said, Grandpa had retired from the company. I had come into the company. We'd lost Olin. Melinda and I had kids. My sister was coming home from chiropractic school, and we didn't know exactly what her future was, if she wanted to be on the ranch part-time or full-time. So anyway, we messed around. Finally, in 2014, we sat down with Roland Cruz and put together a new holistic goal. And we just call it our vision now, because Melinda and I jumped ship, and we're over on the ranch for profit side now.
I know, the traders here. That's interesting.
Yeah, we can't call it a holistic goal anymore, but we still do. So anyway.
You can call it whatever you want, Shannon. It's okay.
And that was the document that really drove us to where we are now. A few pieces that were in that were opportunities for personal growth. And I think that's part of what allowed Melinda and I to do what we're doing now. And I'll let Mom and Dad talk about what that means to them as well. That's kind of allowed Kagan to come back into the operation in the way he has.
Kagan, just to be clear, is your son. You guys also have 2 kids.
Yep. Kagan and Gentry. Kagan just graduated from UW a year ago and has been working for us just over a year, full time. And then Gentry's she's starting her junior year at the University of Wyoming. And if she ends up back on the ranch, I will be shocked. She loves the ranch life, but she loves to write. And so she's looking for a journalist career.
She's already had a few things. Where did I see her recently? Or she was modeling. That's what she was doing.
Oh, so yeah.
She did do that.
Modeling and writing. Yeah.
She writes pretty frequently for Working Ranch magazine too.
Okay. And I think I've seen that a few times. That's right.
Yeah.
Good. And if you haven't, look up Kagan on social media. He's very active there.
His fiance Darby is a communications major, just wrapping up her master's. And so when you say Kagan, you actually mean Darby. He's just
good.
In front of the camera. But no, they do great. There's been some opportunities come for the ranch, for Sims Cattle Company, because of those kids having that interest and some talent for it. So anyway, the new holistic goal, another part of that was adapted genetics. And you keep bringing up the heifers, and we're going to keep pushing you off. But when we get there, that was a direct result of knowing what we wanted for that. The final piece of that was in 2014, October of 2014, when we finished that up. In 2014, another neighboring ranch, an older gentleman and his niece that owned a place, he ranched it up until he didn't want to ranch anymore, but he still lived on the place, leased it out to another guy. That lease expired. The guy he was leasing it to didn't want it anymore. And they approached us and asked us to lease the place. And again, we sat down at the table. It was the 4 of us, Mom, Dad, Melinda, and I, and kind of looked at each other and is like, I don't think we're ready to take this on. But we knew if we didn't, Kagan would never have a chance to be here. So we bit that off, and now we know how to run it, and it's hard to imagine ever having doubted that we could incorporate that. But just when you're faced with those big decisions, it's so good to have that vision out there 5, 10, 15, 50 years. It makes some of that stuff a lot easier to bite off, because where we were in 2014, there was still some stuff that we were busting our butts. I think we still had 2 hired men for the summer trying to put up hay, and it was almost an overwhelming amount of work and to take that on, but we did it, and now I'm so glad we did. So
we talk a lot on this podcast about profitability, risk, and decision making, but none of that works if you don't know your numbers. At RanchRight, we help producers build clarity around cash flow, margins, and risk, so the decisions we talk about on Ranchonomics actually work in the real world. If you want fewer surprises and more control, that's where to start. Book a discovery call today at ranchlightllc.com.
I'm going to add to that. At that same time, April was pumping oil wells between here and Medicine Bow, and it was getting a little hard on her, out in the wintertime, and couldn't see where you're going. When we leased this last place, thought, that's an opportunity for April to come back and be a part of this ranching. She was part-time anyhow. She was helping anyhow on the range, but she got to leave the oil field and come back and be a part of the operation there.
I can't imagine anything more pleasant than being out in the winter and pumping wells up your neighborhood. As nice as your country is in the summer, it's almost better in the winter, right?
Well, she called me up one time between here and there, and she says, "Scott, I'm off the road and I can't see anything." I guess you're just going to have to wait a while. And it did kind of clear enough. She could see the road again. And
Not exactly what I was wanting to hear. I was thinking,
exactly. Well, I guess I can't help. Sorry.
you got cows to cab, man. You're on your own.
She wanted to hear, "I'll be right there," in that tractor we bought on our first date.
Oh, and I tell the story too, that tractor really wasn't that great. It didn't last very long, but April's lasted a long time.
Oh, that's good. You chose the right side of that deal, huh?
Hey, can I back up a second?
You bet.
Whenever we first started our holistic grazing, very, very important thing that we did, and I think it was the spring of 90, after we got back from that school, April and I went to a range monitoring school at Paso Robles, California.
Yeah, very good. Who put that on?
That was through Savory.
Okay, yep. And it was HRM at the time, right, in 1990?
Right.
Yep.
It was. And it was a dart throw system. So that's something that we implemented early. And I am really, really glad that we did, because there's so many people that come home and going to make all these big changes. And those changes in our kind of environment, a lot of environments, don't happen real fast. I think a lot of people got discouraged where we were seeing some changes. We were seeing some things. We're seeing more life out there on the land, bugs, insects type deal, healthier plants, litter. I think a big thing it did for us is it taught us how to look down at and see what's
As
going on.
opposed to looking across.
Exactly. And that's something, we can do every day. Just go look down at. That helped us a lot.
Did you take that class while you were trying the 30-day rotation deal, or had you already switched from that?
Well, that was before we really even got started. That was when we took the class. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And we never tried the 30-day rotation. It was pretty obvious at home that, we're only going to go through these pastures once in a season. That was pretty obvious. And that's something that I think people miss too. It's not a recipe. It's something that you have to adapt to your environment. And every environment.
Oh, yeah. But you have to be careful what you say, because people are listening and they latch on to stuff.
Yeah.
And to be fair, Savory got a lot of flack from all kinds of people for some of the very specific things he did say. And he made a lot of claims that right down the road from you at UW, there's a whole squad of people that were interested in proving him wrong. And it was the same all over the place. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. April, real quickly before we go on, when were you guys having kids? Because Shannon and Kendra are both a little younger than I am.
Shannon was born in 79 and Kinder was born in 83.
So actually a lot younger than you, John.
Well, yes, thank you, Shannon. I appreciate that. But I have more hair and darker hair, so let's go there. Yeah. Never mind. But I noticed Melinda and April have none, so no gray hair. So perfect.
I was like, wait, it's not a wig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so were you pumping oil wells while you had kids at home?
No, that
Okay.
came much
You
later.
did that later. Okay.
Yeah. One thing about the monitoring that we used to do was we have a picture somewhere of Shannon. He had on a red and blue striped shirt, of course, jeans of some kind. He's laying on his belly counting bugs. And the kids just really used to get into that. And I just remember us kind of stepping back and looking at each other over the kids. And yeah, some good memories.
Oh, that's fantastic. My kids are so anything like that. Mine are 4, 5, and 7 right now, and they're all about it. If they can find a spider, a butterfly, a worm, or whatever, they just think any kind of flower, like they're all about it. So keeps it fun. That's wonderful. That's pretty cool. All right, where do we want to go next? Shannon doesn't want to talk about heifers yet. I know we got more to think about. I'd really like to talk about your original holistic goal and then the evolution of that. So, how much did it really change? What were some of the specifics of your first one? And then how does your second one look different?
Well, I don't know the specifics of the first one. That was part of the problem with it.
Yeah, okay.
No, it was pretty generic, it seemed like.
Okay.
Basically, to me, it stated things like we would all want to see. Where the newer version that we have, I feel like it's something that we can go back to with each one of us. Okay, are we meeting our goal for each one of us and their desires?
Yeah. So a little less kind of grandma's apple pie and a little more specific things that fit your opportunities, personalities, situation, et cetera. Is that fair?
We so often in the Ranching for Profit school, we have people come to us, to Melinda and I as instructors.
Which you guys teach. Yeah.
And they ask us if they should go home and write their vision themselves. And we almost 100% of the time say, no, hire a facilitator to help you. And I think that was the biggest difference between these guys' original. And I was 10 years old when they wrote it, so I don't know. But I think that's the big difference is Dad and Olin sat down and they thought about what they wanted. And I think they were probably constrained a little bit by what they believed they could have. And that document was, as opposed to when we brought in Roland, and it was Dad and Olin, Dad just talked about that. It was just the two of them that wrote it. When we brought in Roland Cruz, we took 3 days and we cleared a wall in Mom and Dad's house and covered it with paper. And we went through the ICA process with the sticky notes and stuck them to the wall with all the ideas of what people wanted. And so we included everybody. It was
adults.
It was Mom and Dad, Melinda, myself, and my sister, Kendra.
Mm-hmm.
We're all involved in making that. And like I'd said, Kendra was pretty fresh home from chiropractic school. And through that process of putting down what we wanted and starting to group those ideas together, there was 2 things that I never expected to come out of it that wouldn't have without that process and without a facilitator. Number one, we found out that Kendra enjoyed the ranching lifestyle and she liked the stress relief that it offered, and she had no desire to be a part of a second business because she already had her chiropractic business, and that was what fulfilled her. But what she liked was to come home and be a part of things and have some buy-in to the operation. The second part of that is we found out that Mom had always wanted to go to Australia, and I think it was within 6 months the neighbor who we also leased a ranch from was making a trip to Australia, and he asked me if I thought Mom and Dad might be interested in going. And I said, yeah, actually, I know they are. And I don't know, it was like
literally on the wall in the living room. That's
exactly. But back to the importance of having that facilitator, there was a lot of tears involved in those meetings. And there was some uncomfortable conversations, and it wouldn't have happened if we didn't have a professional facilitator. to pull those out of us. And so
to get deeper, to get past those kind of grandma and apple pie type things and really get to what you guys want.
Well, and not only that, but just to make it safe for everybody to say what they really wanted. Because I feel like, I was marrying in, and I can't speak for April, but it's not my operation. And so to say what I really wanted out of it felt weird. And so just to feel safe to say that.
Yeah, interesting.
Facilitator really helps.
Yeah, cool. And he was a very gifted facilitator, right? I mean, a very talented man. Awesome. Okay. Well, that's cool. So do we want to talk about the specifics of your vision that is not a holistic vision?
it's a holistic goal.
Vision.
Holistic goal. I'm sorry. Yeah. It's a holistic vision. I like that. Good.
Yeah, it's a long document. When we were involved with Executive Link, our board hated it when it was our turn because we start those meetings with reading the mission and vision.
Yeah.
And you've got 30 minutes to read your mission and vision and then present your proposed agenda and then let your board work you over and figure out what you actually should be working on. And it took us about 10 minutes to get through our vision and they hated it, so it's long, but I wouldn't trade it because it's so thorough. But just to give you a synopsis of it, it boils down to, like we've already talked about, adaptive genetics, personal growth, healthy landscapes, and financial freedom, essentially, are the four components. Family inspired.
Yeah, family inspired. But we also detailed in there how we're going to treat each other.
Yeah.
How we're going to listen to each other. I mean, it's very specific. How we're going to support our community and the local restaurants, because we want to see that as part of, where we live. So we're very, very detailed in it, and we left our original words. So like I can point to a phrase and say, "Oh, Kendra said this."
Right.
She bought in because she believed in this, and because it was important to her, it's important to all of us. And so it's broad in some ways, but it's actually very detailed.
Yeah. Although I'm going to say I'm struggling McFadden and restaurants. How many restaurants do we have in town there?
It's 12 miles away. That's low.
We got a ways to go on that part, huh?
We've got 3 restaurants within 22 miles of here.
Do you really?
No, 4. Yeah, we're actually quite cosmopolitan.
I mean, we're in the middle of a metropolis because you got Medicine Bow on one side, Elk Mountain, and Rock River. So
there you go. Yeah, I guess if you throw the circle wide enough, then that is you've gone 3 towns away, but that's all right. Very good. So that document, like you're talking about, has that level of specificity, really, really has those very personalized parts to it. And then you use that as a real sounding board as you are making decisions, right?
You want to talk about the heifer development?
Well, yes. I was also going to bring up, Shannon talked about us being on an executive link board. And one of the things that they kept, wanting to know why we didn't do was sending cattle to corn stalks in the wintertime. And yeah, maybe it would be more profitable, but all we had to do was look at our goal and go, that goes directly against adapted genetics, for our area. And it was a no-brainer for us. They had a little harder time understanding why it was a no-brainer for us. But it was a decision we didn't even need to ponder. There were other things that we could spend our energy on because that's what we decided to believe in. So the adapted genetics, I guess that was 2014. Mm-hmm. 2014 was a big year. I had found we were kind of just struggling. Our heifers would go to the feedlot to be developed over the winter, and they would come home very, very large, very fat. We would get great breed up as heifers, but then as 3-year-olds
crash out as 3s.
It was terrible. And so we were looking for something to do, and we had this goal of adapted genetics. And, so sending something 150 miles away didn't make sense for that. So we were really trying to figure out how we do it because, as you know, it's pretty harsh here.
Yep. And just to be clear, 150 miles away is also like 4,000 feet lower and really is a banana belt where they can grow corn. And you do not live where you can grow corn.
No. So I had found an article, and it was 3 different ranches, one in Canada, one in North Dakota, and I cannot remember the
I think it was 2 in North Dakota.
2 in North Dakota. And they had referenced Gerald Fry and his research on rumen development. And his research stated that in order to fully develop that rumen, a grazing animal needed 10 months of butter fat. And I was like, well, if we're trying to develop the perfect grazing animal, we're not giving them, the time to develop to their full potential. And so we had initiated strategy meetings. We'd meet, once a week, once every 2 weeks, whatever, as mostly the four of us at that point, and Kendra, if she was available. So I brought that information to the strategy meeting, and I was like, what if we didn't wean our heifers? And everybody just took that home and thought about it. And then I actually don't even really remember how, we made the decision, yes, we're going to do that. But
I want to jump in here real quick and just point out legacy, right? My grandpa may have not been the most open-minded person in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways, he was very open-minded. And so I remember fresh out of college, I had lots of great ideas, including bringing stabilizers genetics into the herd.
Right.
And Dad and talked to Olin about it, and we were AIing already, and so they were game. But Dad said, you need to go talk to your grandpa about it. And I said, okay. And so went to grandpa.
About this rumen development and leaving the heifers on?
No, just about bringing in stabilizers.
Okay,
so this
okay.
2002, I think.
Yeah.
Way before we got to rumen development.
Right.
So just a new idea, bringing in these composite animals that were part Simmental. And so Dad asked me to run it past Grandpa, and I met Grandpa in his kitchen, and I told him, I said, there's this composite breed, they're Gelby, they're Simmental, they're half Angus, they complement our balancers pretty nicely. I'd like to do it. And he looked at me like I had something growing out of my head, because a Simmental to him was still 1975, and you cut them. They did not just birth. And he said,
spotted for anybody that wasn't around then, right?
Yeah, exactly. The flecky. He looked at me and he goes, well, I think you're crazy, but I'm too old to stand in the way of progress. You've got my blessing. And so we started using stabilizers. And so when it says, we all went home and we thought about it, I think probably we didn't all just go home and think about it. We all went home and went, is this a risk we actually want to take? But that was the legacy that Grandpa started, way before that, but that's stuck with us ever since.
That is an amazing statement, really.
And I think that, it's important that, he wasn't going to stand in the way of progress, but Shannon wasn't a partner.
Yeah. Right.
He was an employee. I'm not a partner.
Right.
I'm an employee. I'll not be a partner. But they listen to all of us as though we are, because part of that holistic goal is we've all bought in as though we are partners. And so I think that's really important to understand about this family is ownership isn't the last say. Ownership isn't who has all the answers. So
most days.
Most days.
Can I throw something in?
Yeah.
So we went home and discuss whether we thought we should do this or not. And with April and I, our concern was, man, we're going to leave a calf on cow until February. That cow's going to be thin. Is she going to breed back? What's going to happen?
Because prior to that, all of us that had worked in high mountain, cold situations had been taught to get that calf off early, right? And get condition on that mom and guard her condition with your life between weaning and calving, right?
Yes. So we were pretty skeptical, but kind of back with the same idea as Grandpa. It's like, let's do this and let's see what happens. And it was pretty amazing that those cows bred back. I mean, Shannon, is there 1% difference? Has there been 1% difference in the breed back on those that had the calves on them till February?
I quit tracking it after 7 or 8 years, but it was 2% difference and 3 pounds difference in calf weights the following year.
Just that one change alone, I think, led to a cascade of changes in mindsets and profitability. We teach in the Ranch Profit School that, a breakthrough is 10x. Something can be 10 times bigger or 10 times smaller. Our feed bill, even feeding those cows to get heifers through the winter, was 10 times smaller than feeding the heifers in a feedlot. And then on top of that, we have a great market for heifers, open heifers, just the way that we manage them. And it just led to a lot more breakthroughs. I think once people take that first step, that scary step into something different.
Something else that really stood out too is whenever we take those calves to Torrington, to the feedlot, even the replacement heifers, there'd be quite a few sick ones. They'd doctor quite a few calves. And then whenever they'd bring them back, of course, they would lose weight, but we'd fight foot rot. We'd have foot rot, something terrible. 1 year pink eye, something terrible. But now, with weaning these calves in February, we might lose a calf. We might doctor 2 calves after weaning. Not maybe a foot rot type deal. They stay healthy. They just go on and low maintenance. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for listening. We're going to conclude part 1 of this interview today and continue next week. We look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for tuning into the Ranchonomics podcast. We hope this episode helped you win today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend.